Be me, just a regular guy working in IT. Not a code wizard or a networking genius, just a sysadmin. The guy you call when the server rack starts making a funny noise, or when you can't log in because you forgot your password for the 5th time this month. The job is fine. It pays the bills. For years, the department was this quiet, forgotten corner of the company. We had our own little ecosystem, a bunch of guys who just wanted to come in, do our work, and go home. Our boss was this old-timer who was coasting to retirement. He knew the systems inside and out, but basically let us run things as long as the lights stayed on. The atmosphere was professional, but relaxed. We'd talk about games, movies, what project car we were sinking too much money into. Nobody cared about office politics. We just made sure the digital heart of the company kept beating. It was stable, predictable. In a world that feels like it's constantly going insane, having a stable, predictable job felt like a small victory. Then our boss finally retired. He got his golden handshake and a sheet cake in the break room. We all wished him well. And then we waited to see who his replacement would be. Rumors started flying around. Maybe they'd promote from within. Maybe they'd bring in some tech hotshot from a competitor. What we got was something else entirely. Her name was Elaine. She was an external hire. Her background wasn't even in IT. It was in human resources management and synergistic corporate development, or some other nonsense you see on LinkedIn profiles. Her first day, she called an all-hands meeting for our department, all 10 of us. She walked in with this painfully bright smile, holding a brand new MacBook like it was a holy tablet. The first words out of her mouth weren't about server uptime, or ticket backlogs, or our current projects. They were about the vibrational energy of the department, I swear to God. She wanted to recontextualize our workspace and foster a more inclusive and forward-thinking paradigm. I looked over at Saul. He's the oldest guy on our team, been with the company since they were using floppy disks. He had this perfectly blank expression, the kind you learn after surviving 30 years of corporate meetings. Landry, the youngest on our team, basically a kid fresh out of college, was trying so hard not to laugh that his face was turning red. Elaine spent the next hour talking. She used every buzzword in the book: synergy, optics, leveraging assets, unpacking dynamics. It was like a corporate word salad generator had come to life. She never once mentioned what we actually do, not a single word about infrastructure, security, or support. The entire meeting was about feelings, how the office felt, how our presence as a predominantly male department created an unspoken power imbalance. We all just sat there, nodding, waiting for it to be over. This was sometime in the late spring, I think. The quiet, easy days were officially over. Her first week was a whirlwind of changes. She decided the lighting in our server room was too aggressive and had maintenance install softer, dimmer bulbs. In a server room, where you need to see what you're doing. She replaced the old coffee machine with some fancy pod-based thing that was always broken and cost a fortune. She scheduled mandatory weekly check-in meetings where we had to go around the room and share our emotional state regarding our work. Saul, in his dry, monotone voice, once said his emotional state was a deep and abiding desire for this meeting to end so I can replace a failing hard drive. Elaine did not find that amusing. She told him he needed to work on being more open and vulnerable with the team. Saul just stared at her until she moved on. The whole thing felt like a weird social experiment that we never agreed to be a part of. The work was still getting done, but now it was buried under this thick layer of corporate nonsense. We tried to ignore it, to just keep our heads down and do our jobs. But she seemed to take our lack of enthusiasm as a personal challenge. She was on a mission to fix us. The real trouble started about a month into her reign. It came in the form of an email. The subject line was, "New departmental dress code policy for a more inclusive future." I opened it, expecting some standard stuff. No t-shirts with offensive slogans, wear closed-toe shoes, the usual boilerplate. What I read made my brain short-circuit. The email, penned by Elaine, of course, announced a new dress code effective immediately, for our department only. It stated, and I remember the wording almost perfectly, that to combat subconscious intimidation and dismantle patriarchal symbolic structures, all overtly masculine attire was now banned. Let that sink in. Not unprofessional attire, not sloppy attire, Masculine attire. What does that even mean? The email went on to list a few vague examples. Business suits that convey aggressive authority. We're IT guys. None of us had worn a full suit to work, ever. Shirts with overly structured collars or cuffs. So, most button-down shirts. Heavy-soled footwear like work boots that suggest physical dominance. Anything that reinforces traditional, rigid male archetypes. It was the most insane, ambiguous, and unenforceable set of rules I had ever seen. The office was silent for about 5 minutes as everyone read it. Then the questions started. Landry sent a message in our team chat. So are my sneakers too dominant? Saul walked over to my desk. Does my wedding ring count as a patriarchal symbolic structure? Nobody knew what to do. The rules were so vague they could mean anything. Was a polo shirt too masculine? What about jeans? A leather belt? It felt like a trap. No matter what we wore, if Elaine decided it was too masculine, we were in violation of a direct policy. This was a level of workplace insanity I had never encountered. We decided we needed clarification. We couldn't work under a set of rules that were based entirely on the subjective feelings of our boss. We nominated me to be the one to talk to her. I guess I'm the most level-headed of the bunch. I waited until the end of the day and knocked on her open office door. She looked up from her laptop, that same bright artificial smile plastered on her face. I asked her if she had a minute to clarify some points in the new dress code email. Her smile tightened just a little. I explained that the team was confused, that the terms used were very subjective, and we wanted to make sure we were complying properly. I asked for specific concrete examples of what was acceptable and what wasn't. Haven, she said, her voice dripping with condescension, it's not about a checklist. It's about the intent and the energy you bring into the space. I swear, if I had $1 for every time she said energy or space, I could have retired. I pushed back gently. I told her that for a policy to be effective, it needs to be clear and understandable for everyone. What one person considers aggressive, another might see as just normal clothing. She leaned back in her chair and sighed, as if explaining a complex concept to a small child. Look, she said, the male-dominated tech world has a toxicity problem. It's my job to create a safe space here, and that starts with de-escalating the visual cues of male dominance. She was not going to give me a straight answer. She told me to just use my emotional intelligence and be an ally. The conversation was over. I had gotten absolutely nowhere. I walked out of her office feeling more frustrated than ever. It wasn't about a dress code. It was about control. It was about making us constantly second-guess ourselves, making us walk on eggshells. I reported back to the team. They were not happy. The next day, everyone came to work visibly uncomfortable. Guys who normally wore simple button-downs were in old, faded sweaters. People were wearing soft-soled shoes that looked like slippers. We looked ridiculous. And we were still just guessing. Elaine walked through the department with a pleased little smile. She saw our discomfort as a sign her policy was working. She thought she was enlightening us. We just felt like we were being treated like a problem to be solved. This went on for about a week. The tension in the office was thick. Nobody was talking much. Productivity was probably dipping because everyone was wasting mental energy trying to figure out if their pants were too structured. We decided on a new course of action. If our direct manager wouldn't give us a clear answer, we would go to HR. There had to be someone in the company who understood how absurd this was. So, 4 of us, me, Saul, Landry, and another guy, scheduled a meeting with the head of HR. Her name was Braylon. We walked into the HR department. It was even more sterile and soulless than I imagined. Beige walls, generic inspirational posters about teamwork and integrity. Braylon greeted us with the same kind of professional, detached smile as Elaine. It must be something they teach in HR school. We sat down, and I calmly laid out the situation. I explained that our department had been issued a new dress code policy. I showed her a printout of the email. I explained that the terms were ambiguous and subjective. I explained that we had tried to get clarification from our manager, Elaine, and had been met with vague platitudes about energy and feelings. I told her, very professionally, that we just wanted to understand the rules so we could follow them. We wanted a clear written list of acceptable and unacceptable items. That's it. Braylon listened patiently, nodding the whole time. When I was finished, she looked at the email, then back at us. Well, she began, Our company is deeply committed to fostering an inclusive and diverse workplace. Oh no, not this again. We empower our managers to implement policies they feel best support a positive and safe environment for their teams. She was reading from a script, an invisible HR script that's all about avoiding liability. Saul, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "With all due respect, Braylon," he said, "how can we follow a rule when we don't know what the rule is? Can I wear a blue shirt tomorrow? Is that overtly masculine? Who decides?" Braylon just smiled. "That's a conversation you should be having with your manager. HR is here to support both of you in finding a collaborative solution." It was a masterclass in saying nothing. She was actively refusing to do her job. She saw the email. She knew it was insane, but intervening would mean contradicting another manager, and that was a political risk she was not willing to take. Landry, ever the blunt one, asked, "So, you're not going to do anything?" Braylon's smile didn't waver. "I'm encouraging you to open a dialogue with Elaine." She then handed us a glossy pamphlet on effective communication in the workplace. We were being stonewalled, completely and utterly shut down. The system that was supposed to protect employees from arbitrary and unfair rules was actively working to uphold them. We walked out of that meeting feeling completely defeated. We had followed the chain of command. We had been professional. We had done everything by the book, and we were told that the problem wasn't the insane rule. The problem was us. We just needed to communicate better. That evening, we all stayed late, not to work, but to talk. The mood was grim. Saul was seriously talking about looking for a new job. He said he was too old to be dealing with this kind of nonsense. He'd rather retire early than spend his last few years being treated like a potential threat. Landry was trying to make jokes, but even he was deflated. Everyone felt powerless. We were stuck. We either quit our jobs or submitted to this daily ritual of humiliation and uncertainty. We sat there in the quiet office, the only light coming from our monitors. And then something in my brain just clicked. All that frustration, all that anger at being dismissed and ignored, it coalesced into a single, beautifully simple idea. I looked at the guys. "She wants us to follow the policy," I said. They all looked at me, confused. "She wants us to not wear masculine clothes. HR wants us to collaborate with her policy." I paused, letting it sink in. "Okay," I said. "Let's give them exactly what they want." Landry's eyes lit up. I think he got it immediately. Saul just looked tired. "What are you talking about, Haven?" "It's a concept called malicious compliance," I explained. "It's when you follow a rule so literally and so completely that it exposes how stupid the rule is." I laid it out for them. The policy bans overtly masculine attire. It does not, however, mandate any other kind of attire. The rules are intentionally vague to give Elaine all the power. But that vagueness is also her biggest weakness. We can't be punished for wearing something that is, by any definition, not masculine. I looked at each of them. "Tomorrow," I said, "we all wear skirts to work." There was a moment of stunned silence. Landry burst out laughing, a real, loud, cathartic laugh. "That is the greatest idea I have ever heard," he said between gasps. Saul, however, looked horrified. "You can't be serious," he said. "They'll fire us on the spot." "For what?" I shot back. "For following the dress code? The dress code Elaine wrote and HR endorsed. What can they possibly say?" I started breaking down the logic. Think about it. Elaine sees us walk in wearing skirts. What does she do? If she says we can't wear them, why? Is it because they're unprofessional? Lots of women in this very office wear skirts. Is she going to ban them for everyone? That would cause a riot. Is it because we're men? If she says men can't wear skirts, she's the one enforcing rigid gender roles. She'd be violating the very inclusivity she claims to champion. She'd be a laughingstock. She has no winning move, I concluded. She's put herself in a box. We're just going to help her close the lid. The sheer inescapable logic of it started to dawn on Saul. A slow smile spread across his face. "She would have to admit her policy is a joke to stop us," he said, the wonder evident in his voice. It was perfect. It wasn't a protest. It wasn't a violation of the rules. It was the most obedient, rule-abiding act we could possibly commit. We were going to comply so hard it would break her. The energy in the room completely shifted. The despair was gone, replaced by a kind of giddy, nervous excitement. We spent the next hour planning it out. We had to get everyone on board, all the guys in the department. If only one or two of us did it, they could single us out as troublemakers. But if all of us did it, it wasn't an individual act of defiance. It was a departmental response. We talked to the other guys. A couple were hesitant, just like Saul was. But once we explained the logic, they came around. The thought of the look on Elaine's face was a powerful motivator. The plan was simple. Go to a cheap department store tonight. Buy the most basic, inoffensive skirts we could find. Nothing flashy, just simple plain skirts. We would come in tomorrow at our usual time. We would not act like anything was different. We would sit at our desks, answer support tickets, reboot servers. We would do our jobs. And we would let the absurdity of the situation speak for itself. As we were leaving the office for the night, Landry clapped me on the shoulder. "Dude," he said, "you're a legend." I didn't feel like a legend. I just felt tired of being pushed around. Tired of being told I was a problem just for existing. This wasn't just about a stupid dress code anymore. It was about drawing a line. That night, I went to a giant 24-hour superstore. Walking into the women's clothing section felt surreal. I had no idea what I was looking for. I just grabbed a simple black knee-length skirt that looked like it might fit. I bought it at a self-checkout kiosk, feeling like I was some kind of secret agent on a mission. Driving home, I couldn't stop thinking about what would happen the next day. There was a very real chance this could all blow up in our faces. We could all be fired, but the alternative was to just sit there and take it, to let this person with a bizarre agenda walk all over us, day after day. And I just wasn't willing to do that. We had tried to be reasonable. We had tried to be professional. They had left us with no other option. They wanted us to follow the rules. Tomorrow, we would. To the letter. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. I stood in front of my closet for a good 5 minutes, just staring. My normal work clothes, jeans, button-downs, polos, all seemed like they were from a different lifetime. Then I looked at the black skirt, folded neatly on my dresser. It felt completely ridiculous. Putting it on was one of the strangest experiences of my life. It was just a piece of clothing, but it felt like I was putting on a suit of armor for the weirdest battle imaginable. The drive to work was nerve-wracking. I kept thinking, what if I'm the only one who does it? What if everyone else chickened out? Then I'm just the weirdo in a skirt who gets fired for being a smart aleck. I parked in my usual spot and just sat in the car for a minute, taking a deep breath. This is either going to work, or it's going to be the most spectacular failure of my career. I got out of the car and walked towards the building. It was the longest walk of my life. I was wearing a plain polo shirt, my work ID badge, and the skirt. I felt like every single person was staring at me. I got to our department. I turned the corner into our workspace, and then I saw it. Landry was already at his desk, typing away. He was wearing a bright pink skirt. He saw me, gave me a huge grin, and a subtle thumbs up. A few desks down, Saul was booting up his computer. He had on a sensible pleated gray skirt that almost looked like part of a uniform. He caught my eye and gave a slow, deliberate nod. One by one, the rest of the guys trickled in. Every single one of them. Different styles, different colors, but they all did it. We were all in this together. The feeling of relief was immense. We didn't say anything about it. We just got to work. That was part of the plan. Act completely normal. The abnormality of the situation should speak for itself. The first person from outside our department to notice was a woman from marketing who came by to ask about a printer issue. She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes going wide. She looked from me to Landry to Saul. Her brain was visibly trying to process what she was seeing. She just sort of mumbled, I'll put in a ticket," and then practically ran away. Within 20 minutes, the news had spread. You could feel the change in the office atmosphere. It was usually just the low hum of computers and keyboards. Now, there was a constant buzz of whispering. People started finding excuses to walk past our department, grabbing coffee, going to the restroom, just stretching their legs. They'd walk by, trying to be subtle, but you could see them staring. None of us acknowledged it. We just kept working. A couple of the women on our team were trying their best to pretend nothing was happening, but you could see them hiding their smiles behind their monitors. One of them sent Landry a private message that just said, "I'm dying." The tension was building. We were all just waiting for one person to arrive, Elaine. She usually came in around 9:30 a.m. after getting her expensive coffee, and right on schedule, she walked in. She was on her phone, laughing at something, not paying attention. She walked towards her office, which was at the end of our row of desks. She passed the first few desks without looking up. Then she must have sensed something was off. The quiet, the atmosphere. She lowered her phone, she looked up, and she froze. Her cheerful expression just melted off her face. It was replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. Her eyes darted from one employee to the next. Me in my black skirt, Landry in his pink one, Saul in his gray one. All of us, just sitting there, working. Her mouth opened slightly but no sound came out. For a solid 30 seconds she just stood there, completely paralyzed. The entire office was silent, watching her. Then the shock turned into anger. Her face got red. Her eyes narrowed. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "Haven, my office, now!" Her voice was quiet, but it was shaking with rage. I calmly saved the document I was working on, locked my computer, and walked into her office. I closed the door behind me. She was pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "What is this?" she hissed. "What do you think you are doing?" I stayed calm. I kept my voice even and professional. This was the most important part. I couldn't let her bait me into an emotional response. "I'm following your policy, Elaine," I said simply. She stopped pacing and stared at me, her eyes burning. "This is not following the policy. This is a mockery. This is insubordination." I just stood there and let her vent. I explicitly banned aggressive masculine attire to create a safer, more welcoming environment, she said, her voice getting louder. "And you do this? You turn my department into a circus? This is the most toxic, passive-aggressive thing I have ever seen." I waited for her to finish. "Is a skirt masculine attire?" I asked. The question completely threw her off guard. "What? Of course not. That's not the point." "Then I'm not in violation of the dress code," I stated plainly. "The policy you wrote prohibits masculine clothing. It does not prohibit wearing skirts. I'm complying with the rules." She looked like her brain was about to explode. She was sputtering, trying to form a response. You know this isn't what I meant. You are twisting my words to undermine my authority." "I tried to get clarification from you," I reminded her. "The team and I asked for specific guidelines. You told us to use our emotional intelligence, so we did. We determined that these outfits are the least masculine option available, and therefore, the most compliant with your policy." The logic was inescapable, and she knew it. Every argument she could possibly make would crumble. If she ordered us to take them off and put on pants, she would be ordering us to wear more masculine clothing, violating her own rule. If she said that men are not allowed to wear skirts, she would be the one enforcing rigid, traditional gender norms, making her a massive hypocrite. She had absolutely no way out. She just stared at me, speechless and fuming. She had been so sure of her power, so certain of her moral high ground, and it was all being dismantled by a piece of black fabric I bought for $15. I could see the exact moment she realized she had lost. Her anger deflated, replaced by a look of sheer panic. "Get out," she whispered. "Just get out of my office." I walked out and calmly sat back down at my desk. The whole team was looking at me. I gave them a small, almost imperceptible nod. Elaine stayed in her office for the rest of the morning, but the damage was done. The story was out. Someone had taken a picture on their phone, a wide shot of our department, with all of us in our skirts, working at our computers. It started circulating through the company's internal messaging system. Then, it somehow got leaked to the wider internet. Someone posted it on a local tech forum. By lunchtime, our department was the laughingstock of the entire company, and Elaine's policy was the punchline. The photo was everywhere. It department maliciously complies with no masculine attire rule. Elaine was a joke. Her authority was completely gone. She tried to recover. In the afternoon, she sent out another department-wide email. It was a long, rambling mess about unprofessional behavior and the importance of respecting the spirit, not just the letter, of company policies. Nobody paid it any attention. It was the desperate flailing of someone who had already lost. We all knew it was only a matter of time. The next day, the email we were all waiting for arrived. It was from the office of the Chief Operating Officer. The COO was a man named Callahan. He was a senior executive, a name you saw on company-wide memos, but someone you never actually saw in person. He was from the old school, all business, no nonsense. The email summoned 3 people to a meeting in the main executive boardroom that afternoon. Elaine, Braylon from HR, and me as the team representative. This was it, the final showdown. I walked into that boardroom, and it was like entering a different world. It was on the top floor, with a huge window overlooking the city. The table was a single massive piece of polished wood. Callahan was already there, sitting at the head of the table. He was an older guy, probably in his 60s, with a severe expression. He didn't look happy. Elaine and Braylon were sitting on one side of the table, looking terrified. Callahan gestured for me to sit on the other side. He didn't waste any time with pleasantries. He looked at me. I've read the emails. I've seen the picture. I've heard the story from 10 different people. Now I want to hear it from you. Explain to me what happened. Start from the beginning. His tone was cold, impartial. He wasn't looking for drama. He was looking for facts. So I gave them to him. I calmly and chronologically laid out the entire story. The arrival of Elaine, her vague and ideological management style, the email announcing the new dress code, our confusion, our repeated documented attempts to get clarification from both Elaine and HR. I explained how we were met with condescension and corporate non-answers, how we were given a set of rules impossible to follow and then blamed for not understanding them. Then I explained the idea of malicious compliance. I was very clear. I said, we were left with 2 options, quit our jobs or follow the policy to its logical conclusion. We chose to follow the policy. I finished by saying, we did not seek to cause a disruption. We sought clarity. When that was denied, we complied with the written rules we were given. I said my piece and then fell silent. Callahan listened to the entire thing without interrupting. He just stared at me, his expression unreadable. When I was done, he turned his gaze to Elaine. Is this accurate? He asked. Elaine started talking, but it wasn't a defense. It was a tirade. She talked about the pervasive culture of male toxicity. She said we were sabotaging her initiative, that our actions were a coordinated attack on her as a female leader, that we had created a hostile and unsafe work environment with our stunt. She never once addressed the core issue, the ambiguity and unfairness of her own policy. Callahan let her talk for about 5 minutes. Then he held up a hand. That's enough, he said, his voice flat. He looked from Elaine to Braylon, then back to Elaine. Your job, as a department head, he said, his voice dangerously quiet, is to manage your team to ensure maximum productivity and efficiency. Your job is to solve problems, not create them. He picked up a printout of the picture of us in our skirts. This, he said, tapping the photo, is a problem. This makes my company look like a circus. This wastes time, kills morale, and opens us up to potential lawsuits I don't even want to think about. He looked directly at Elaine. You took a functional, productive team and, in the space of a month, turned them into a company-wide meme through your own mismanagement and ideological crusade. Your policy was vague, unprofessional, and unenforceable. When your employees rightly asked for clarification, you patronized them. You failed as a manager. He then turned to Braylon. And you, he said, your job in HR is to mitigate risk and resolve disputes. When a group of employees came to you with a legitimate grievance about a nonsensical policy, you fed them corporate platitudes and sent them away with a brochure. You failed in your primary function. The silence in the room was deafening. Callahan looked back at Elaine. Elaine, your employment with this company is terminated, effective immediately. Please gather your personal belongings. Security will escort you out. Elaine just stared, her face white with shock. He then looked at me. Haven, he said, his tone shifting slightly. It wasn't friendly, but it wasn't hostile either. It was just business. The policy is rescinded. Your department will revert to the standard company-wide dress code. I expect you and your team to be dressed accordingly tomorrow. He paused for a second. Your team's response was unorthodox, he said, a very slight hint of a smile touching the corner of his mouth. But your logic was sound. Now go back to work. The meeting was over. I walked out of that boardroom feeling like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Back in the department, everyone was waiting. I told them what happened. A quiet cheer went through the room. Saul walked over and shook my hand. I haven't seen anything that satisfying in 30 years, he said. The next day we all came to work in our normal clothes, jeans, polos, button-downs. It felt good. It felt normal. Elaine was gone. There was a new temporary manager assigned to us, a no-nonsense guy from another department who just cared about the work. The office went back to being a quiet, stable, predictable place. We never set out to be heroes or rebels. We were just a bunch of guys who wanted to do our jobs without being treated like a political project. We were pushed into a corner, and we found the only logical way out. And that's the story of how we defeated a ridiculous, unfair policy with malicious compliance and a dozen cheap skirts.